Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Baranovsky-Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
Hello and welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia. I'm your host, Patty Baranowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Amber Johnson, communications expert and leadership consultant. So welcome, Amber. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, Patty, great to be here with you today. I'm a Chicago-based leadership development consultant. So what that means, because that's a lot of random words strung together, what it means in practice is that companies hire me to come in and build custom designed leadership programs for their people. And then we facilitate them with my team and coach their folks and get them prepared. And my passion is leadership. That's what my PhD is in. But I am also so convinced that the overlap between leadership and communication is about 99%. And so a real specialty of mine, or a real interest of mine, is how to help leaders be better communicators.
Very nice. Yeah, it just seems everybody, I'm kind of like the bad way with that too. Everything's just online and you're writing, but communicate, it's a totally different thing. So I get that. Now, you emphasize the importance of asking better questions. So what makes a good question and how can it transform communication?
Yeah, what makes a good question is such a big topic, and there are a million things that make a good question because, of course, context matters infinitely. But I like to say that there are sort of two table stakes, that rarely is a question good unless it includes these two things. And the first is that it's positive. And by positive, I don't necessarily mean that it's rah-rah cheerleader, super pie in the sky idealistic. I just mean that it's a good faith question, that it is asked with good intentions, that you genuinely want to know, that you ask it in a way that gives positive regard to the other person. So instead of, what were you thinking? It's, oh, okay, help me understand. You know, there's a real difference, and that's the positive. So the first is that any good question has to start by being positive. And the second piece of it is that the question needs to be open. Really good questions are open. And I'm sure you know that instinctively. We're taught in school the difference between an open question and a closed question. But we often think of that as a binary. It's either open or closed. And actually, it's a continuum. That open questions can be much wider open. And really good conversations start in the place where you can't predict somebody else's answer. So the wider open you can make a question, the better it's going to be, especially early in a conversation.
Well,
so just because that's kind of, just because that's kind of obtuse to say, let me just give an example. Do you like the book? That's a closed question. Yes, no, those are the answers. And maybe somebody who's outgoing or has a lot to say would expand, but you gave them a closed question. What do you like about the book is predictable. It's an open question, but it's constrained to the book itself. And then, oh, are you a reader of fantasy? Tell me what you like about fantasy books, or what your favorite genre is, or what is it about strong characters that excites you? Those are much wider open questions that get you into a richer conversation faster.
Oh, I love that. Because it is true. Like I grew up in an era of you're seen and not heard, do as you're told, blah, blah, blah.
Same.
So you had very point blank A, B, C, that's it. But no one ever wanted you to explore and be adventurous and it really, elaborate on what it is you want and need and talk about. So I like that.
Yeah. Thank you. And, there are a lot of us, maybe we're sort of dating ourselves to a certain generation to say that, but we were taught to answer quickly, only speak when spoken to, those sorts of things. And so we have to be reminded that it's not just about asking questions. It's also about being willing to answer and to give more information in your answer. And so how you answer a question is almost as important as what questions you ask.
Right. But you could learn so much from somebody just by having them elaborate on something, because it's easier to just say, yeah, I liked it. Well, what did you like about it? And I could say, that'll give how I answer that could tell you a lot more about me, about what I think, how I work, how I function. So I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It tells, how can leaders foster a culture of trust and open communication in the workplace, especially during challenging times?
Yeah, how can leaders foster trust and open communication? That is a huge topic. It's rooted really in the ideas of psychological safety, which is that we feel a shared belief, not just an individual has the belief, but as a community, we feel a shared belief that we can speak up when something's going on. And to create that sense of psychological safety has to happen before the critical incident. So this is work you've got to be doing now, knowing that in the future it's going to be needed. That's the first thing that leaders need to understand. It's their responsibility to create that kind of culture and to do it now before you're in a moment of crisis, before it's critical, before the numbers are dropping, whatever it is. How do you do it then is a different question. And one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make is they say, bring me your ideas, give me your feedback. And then someone does. And the leader's response isn't generous and it shuts it down. So imagine I come to you and I say, Patty, hey, I really like working for you, but I need you to know that I feel like we're going about this project the wrong way. We're working on X, but I think it should be Y. And here's my reasoning why. And your response is, what do you know? All right. And you dismiss me. I am never going to bring an idea to you again. Now, if your response is even worse than that, if it's like, how could you even think that? You're ignoring this, and this. What an idiot. You're too new in your career. Never bring me an idea again. Well, then, of course, I'm never going to even speak up in a meeting. I'm never going to share an idea or share a concern. But if instead you respond to me and you ask a question, oh, help me understand that. Help me connect the dots. Say more. Have you considered this? What happens when we apply this? And suddenly we're having a conversation about the idea. Then I'm going to know it's safe to bring you an idea again in the future. And even if you don't end up taking my recommendation or my feedback, which is your prerogative as the leader, I will know that I am welcome to bring it again. So the very first thing is to consider how you respond to feedback and to ideas and to innovation. That's tantamount. And the second thing that I think leaders forget, we just get so busy. There's so much urgent on our plates. There's so much pressure that we forget to ask. We forget to ask for feedback. We forget to ask for ideas. We forget to ask how people are feeling about their work. And we forget to celebrate and recognize work that's been done. And when we do that, we create this sense that we have to be so focused on our work, so focused on the immediate, on the urgent, that there's no space for raising concerns, for long-term thinking, for debating an idea. And in those kind of contexts, people shut down over time.
I love all that because it is getting valuable feedback from people, whether, even like on the marketing side, one thing we've always done was say perception studies, where I guess now they have like blind case studies and things like that. But you have no idea what people are thinking, feeling, unless you ask them. And sometimes, like some places will have the anonymous box where you could put in your info. Maybe somebody's just like scared and doesn't want to say how they feel, but you do it anonymously.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you get it across, letting people know like because I could think that what I'm doing is great and everybody loves it. But then when I get the feedback, it's like, wow, they all hate me. What am I doing?
Yeah.
We're all supposed to be a team. So you want to work together. So I agree 100%. And people probably learn so much more. So now what strategies do you recommend for approaching feedback or having tough conversations, whether at work or even at home?
Yeah, well, do the work early. And so much like creating that culture of trust, it has to be built before you hit the crisis in trust. And the context of me giving you feedback or you giving me feedback needs to be built before we hit the moment where the hard stuff has to be said. So that's the first thing. And how do we build that context? I think we are more likely to receive feedback from people who we know are invested and see our strengths. And so going out of our way to recognize the strengths an employee has, to complement their work, to help them see their contribution to the larger project. There's some research that says in any given group of people, you should have 5-to-1 positive to negative communication, which means we should have 5 times more affirmations, 5 times more celebrations of strength, 5 times more positive idea sharing. And that counts nonverbals too, head nods and smiles. We should have 5 times more. And when you do that, it's not just a nice to have. What it does is it says, this is the context where I'm valued, where I have a place, where my strengths are seen. And in that context, when you bring me some feedback about a way I need to grow, I am so much more likely to hear it because I know you have my best interests at heart. I know you're not being calloused or a jerk or biased or self-promotional in your own attempts to cut me down. I can trust that what you're sharing with me is worth considering. And so investing in a really environment of really positive communication is one of the best things leaders can do to ensure that feedback gets heard.
Right. I think that's great. Like I remember way back in the day, working at a company and they had, say, board meetings or, team meetings or whatnot. And it was always the head honchos that would go to this and never the low men on the totem pole. And then we had a manager come on board and he had everybody coming in and we would just kind of sit there like, okay, and then out of nowhere, they'd be like, well, what do you think of that? Now I'm kind of like, does he really want to know what I think of that? But he wanted that. And it was just amazing that I felt heard. And then, maybe I could say what I think, and then you could say, well, not exactly, and here's why. Or you could say, well, I didn't, like you said, I didn't really think of that. Explain more. And you build that trust, you build that connection, and it makes me feel not just some low man on the totem pole who's just in the corner doing a job, but I feel like I'm part of the team and I want to do more now because I feel like you want to hear me, and it's a win-win for everybody.
You just gave one of my favorite questions too, which is, what do you think? Whenever someone comes to you for advice or for guidance, or whenever you're in a debate or a conversation that's, where you're considering multiple ideas, as leaders, it's not your job to talk, it's your job to listen. You already have a seat at the table for making the decision. You know what you think. Figure out what other people think, what you're missing. And that question of what do you think is fabulous because it gives you access to more ideas, but it does something else that we sometimes forget is our responsibility of leaders. And that is it helps our junior staff members develop their thinking as well. And that is so essential for developing their leadership, is giving them voice, helping them get their ideas out there, helping them shape it, helping them learn not to trust other people to just hand them an idea, but instead to work for their solutions themselves.
Oh, I like that. And tell us, what are some of the key communication skills that great leaders need to develop to inspire and connect with their teams?
Yeah. Let's talk about two of them, asking powerful questions and active listening. I think in those two, you can naturally see how they go hand in hand. One demands the other. But asking powerful questions is essential as a leader. And we've covered some of them already, that your questions need to be positive, that they need to be open, that you can just ask very simple things like, what do you think? Tell me, what's the solution that comes to mind to you? But there's so many other tricks for powerful questions that leaders can develop too. One of my favorite is we can, in a meeting, I'm sure you've been in one of those meetings where you just get stuck. You feel like you've been debating the same course of action for ages. There's no new information available. We're just having a hard time making a decision. And often when we're in that moment, it's because we're thinking about the next 3 weeks or the next 30 days or the next 3 years. One of the things you can do is change the time frame as a leader. So ask a question that changes the time frame. What do you think 20 years from now, what's going to feel important about this decision? Or what is the 10-year solution instead of the 10-month solution? And often by changing the time frame, and if you're thinking big sky, then you can reverse that and change the time frame to be more immediate. That's one of the great, powerful questions leaders can ask, is making that shift of timeframes, or shift from thinking about individuals to thinking about the whole system, for example. Anything like that lets us shift our thinking and unlock new possibilities is going to be so helpful in the leadership dialogue. So asking powerful questions is the first thing, and just asking questions as a leader. Sometimes we feel like, oh, the benefit of leadership is that I get to have my voice heard, and that is true, but that's going to happen fairly automatically. So the real blessing of leadership is that you can help other people find their voice. Right. And the more you can do that, the better.
Yeah.
And then that has to be paired with active listening. It absolutely has to be paired with active listening. And what I mean by active listening, we listen at multiple levels, right? The listening while you're still scrolling through your phone or cleaning out your email, that's like level 1. It's the very basics. Maybe you heard them. you can say you had a conversation, but your attention wasn't there.
Mhm.
And then there's the second level that's listening for the facts of the situation. They're telling me the shipment is going to be late. They're telling me that we're 2 weeks ahead on our time frame. They're telling me we're considering 3 options for the vendor. That's the basic facts. That's level 2. And level 3 is where we want to get to with really active listening, especially when the conversation matters or when it's a person in front of us in a moment of challenge. We want to get to level 3, which is everything that's not being said, everything that's being communicated non-verbally, everything our gut is telling us. Oh, they're telling me we're looking at 3 vendors for this project, but I can see when they talk about the first 2 that the hesitations are there. I'm not sure they're really looking at 3 viable options. I think they might just have 1 viable option. Why is that? Am I rushing them too much? Are there not enough great vendors in the area? Is one of them got a bell and a whistle that they think is really vital? What is underneath the surface here? Or if someone's in your office and they're feeling upset, the reason they may be feeling upset, they may describe it as the work from home policy is changing and it's going to be hard for me. But there may be something underneath that. I don't feel valued in how this decision was made. I am anxious about balancing everything I have on my plate. Whatever it is, I work better in quiet and our office is noisy. So level 3 is getting past the facts that are being said and listening with intuition, listening with body language, listening to what isn't being said and asking, what does it really mean? And that's a skill leaders have to develop.
I think that's awesome. You are 100% right, because I know, like, even with, when we would have clients and they want to have meetings, a lot of people didn't even want to meet in a group setting. They wanted to have that one-on-one lunch or something like that, where it's just me and you. There's no distractions. We can be relaxed, eating lunch, whatever, but you hear what I have to say. And I think that's why everybody used to say, oh, they just want the free food. Maybe, but I think they also wanted that one-on-one conversation without the distractions of, now I feel like, okay, I got to talk to 20 people. I have 20 different personalities, 20 different backgrounds, 20 different levels. And I just have that one-on-one. So I agree.
Yeah, I'm curious now that so much of our work is virtual and we might be working with a client that's on the other side of the continent. How do you replicate the effect of that one-to-one lunch in this virtual? I mean, because what we're really talking about is knowing people, not just knowing the facts of the deal.
Right.
What do you recommend?
I guess, from my aspect, I could read somebody's bio, I can see their social media, I can see who they are, what they do. But then again, that doesn't mean that's them on there. That could be their assistant posting all that. So doing something virtual, kind of taking a step back and making it, kind of like this. We're having a conversation. It's not just a strict business thing where we're just talking about that. We just tell people, like, kind of let your hair down for a second. How are the kids? Do you have kids? Well, what are your plans for the holiday? Kind of getting them to feel a little more comfortable so that I could get to know you as a person, as opposed to just being the business. And, it gets a little tricky that way because the businesses want to just have that main focus. But if I want to communicate with somebody, like, say, for example, I'm working with a financial company. I'll just give you a little background on something. So I say I represent companies from around the world, and they don't get to see people all the time. But I'm assuming that you're doing what I'm paying you to do. Like, if I'm, say, a financial company, and we had a company that was, like, invested in this, the financials were tanking. I had them get on and do a 15-minute Zoom interview. And it was just basically letting them know I'm a human person. The stock market goes up and down. It's what it is. We did this. It didn't work. I didn't just set it and forget it and go to sleep. I'm on top of it. I reshuffled it. I moved it around. Now we're doing really good. And people just, even though it wasn't live, it was kind of pre-recorded, but people got to see him, see his reaction, understand, well, you're an actual person. And I appreciate that you were being honest. And that just made, a huge impact on them. And so there's ways that you can kind of beat around the bush. Just be a real person. You have your role, you have your business, but let people see you, see your reaction. That's why so many people just want to do written stuff. People want to see the emotions behind it. They want to see that you're real. They want to see that you understand, and not just the tech, because I could read anything, but that doesn't mean your secretary didn't write it. How do I know it was actually you? How do I know that you even know? Because so many people do that. And so you have no clue what they're even saying. But if I see you communicating, well, that makes a big difference. Now I kind of feel like you understand. And that was another thing where people don't always communicate. So we had like a quarterly outreach for everybody. Just sometimes people don't need the pat on the shoulder and saying, hey, answer all my questions. They just want to be asked and know that you actually value me enough to ask. So there's ways that you can kind of navigate it. It's changed 100%, but I think you can kind of navigate the world a little bit better just by being real, showing your face. Because I don't like a lot of those things where it's virtual. Because I know somebody who was doing that. They would host like a webinar and say, oh, we had 1,000 people on there. It was him, her, and the secretary. I have, so if I see you and see there's people and I can interact, have breakout sessions, whatever the case is, it makes a big difference.
Sense of energy and momentum. You know, I had a really powerful experience of this in the last week, and this takes it into the personal a little more, but I've been helping my family caregive for my grandmother who's 94 and broke her arm and needs to be short-term in a rehab skilled nursing center where she can have the care that we can't provide on a day-to-day basis. And so we got her into a place that was 5-star, extremely professional, nice building, and she hated it. And we ended up moving her to another place that is not as nice a building. It doesn't have this sort of elegance to it. But when we walked in there, one of the first questions the director of nursing said was, what would make your stay here better? Tell me about you. And it was that personal interaction. And every aide that walked in her room said, hi, Miss Joyce, how are you doing today? And they were joking about the upcoming Cardinal season and University of Illinois basketball and things that interest my grandma. And after 2 hours there, they knew her better than after 2 days at this first center. And it makes, I mean, that's a B2C business. And it is absolutely essential that they care for people in a personal way. And they still had to take care of all the medications, and the task of the work was essential. I need it to be extremely professional, but the heart with which they did it absolutely transformed her willingness to be there. And I just think of that impact when you roll it out in your business. Are there clients that have stuck with you because they just like you and they're willing to go through the up and down that is sometimes business, the roller coaster that is sometimes business, because they do trust you because you ask questions like that?
Right. It's ironic. I mean, I don't work for them, but I always admired, say, Coca-Cola, Walt Disney for that, because they do that. Like they have people walking around the parks and ask people what your opinion. They see what the people waiting on the line too long. They do surveys, and it's something as simple as just answer this 10-question survey. I'll give you $25 Amazon card. Something simple, but they do value the people's feedback, and that's what makes them stand out from every place else, because it's not they're probably billionaires. They don't need to, but they care. They want to keep making it better for you. So I love that. I mean, I think making it personal and really understanding people, that's why, because I went through something similar with my stepdad in hospital. Sometimes when you have these big companies, just give you another example. When my son was having his wife was having their first baby, I went there. I was just a nobody there. They wouldn't even let me go up to the room. Basically got told, just sit there and wait. Waited there for like 12 hours. Visiting hours were over. When they told me I could still go up, then it was like, no, visiting hours are over. You got to go. Bye. I like, really, but and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but if you would have just taken 5 minutes and explained this to me, I probably wouldn't have waited. But I'm a person just like everybody else. You have no clue what I'm dealing with, what I'm going through. But having that personalization to anything can really make or break a situation. So I agree 100%.
And, this, to take it back to the space of questions, which of course is one of my passion areas, I think what you're describing is we have to engage people with emotions and experience. We have to be thinking about what they might be experiencing. We have to be asking what their emotions, their feelings are around it. And when we just come into a question, with the mere facts being important, we lose so much of the richness of what we can learn.
Right. Well, that kind of brings me to the next question a little bit. It's like, how can parents effectively communicate with their children about sensitive or challenging topics?
It's my job to have a response to that question. But as a mom of a teenager, I want to just confess or two teenagers, there's just no, There are no easy answers. There are no easy answers. I feel like I've said this 7 times already in the 30 minutes we've been recording, but you do the work early. That is the most important thing. You cannot have the in-depth conversations with your kids if you haven't been having the lighthearted, the build toward it conversations all along. Another key for me, and someone said this to me when my children were little, and I took it to heart and have found it to be true, is that we talk about things like having the sex conversation, having the conversation. But the truth is, you have to have lots of little conversations. So as a parent, remember that relationships are different than business. In business, we can go into a 1-hour meeting and make a multi-million-dollar decision and put all the pieces in place and send people out and expect them to execute on it. It doesn't always happen that way, but it is possible. We can have that expectation that might happen. That is not the way relationships, and in particular parenting, works. You have to keep building the foundation, moving it ahead, inching the conversation along, 15-minute increments or 3-minute increments at a time, and being prepared for real relationship, real conversation to happen as a series rather than a single event is, I think, level setting for parents. It just reminds us we can't solve it in a single conversation. It gives me a little relief, actually, to know that if today's conversation didn't go quite as well as I wanted it to, tomorrow's will help. And it'll help. And over time, it accumulates. I think questions are so important too. And I come back to that idea of a positive question, real positive regard. How can I ask a question that says, especially my teenagers they're logical beings, they're capable thinkers, they have reasons for their choices, they see the world differently than I do. How can I ask a question that shows positive regard for all of that and about which I'm genuinely curious and not judgmental? And whoa, is that hard as a parent? Because, I created this little thing and I think I know what they need. And yet raising them in my image is not what I'm here to do as a parent. I need to let them be most fully themselves while putting some guardrails in place that help them operate within it. So chunking the conversation into smaller bite-sized pieces, I think, is essential. Asking questions with positive regard and genuine curiosity rather than judgment is essential. And trying again and again. And the thing that I have learned that helps me launch awkward conversations with my kids is to start by naming that it's awkward. So a lot of times we think we just have to say, so let's talk about sex, let's talk about whatever it is. And that's fine. But it's like a cold bath of water to have that splash come in your face. And somehow when you just say, hey, there's a conversation that's been on my mind and I want to talk with you about it, but I acknowledge it's a little awkward and I'm going to fumble for my words. Can we talk anyway? Because it's really important to me. And I call that naming the dynamic, naming how I'm feeling coming into the conversation. And it's somehow disarming. It's somehow like a cue to the other person. And you can use this with your kids, but you can also use it with your partner or with your mother or whoever it is. It says, okay, instead of showing up reactionary, I need to actually pause and receive what they're bringing to me because they've already been vulnerable to say that they feel awkward having to raise this. It's a signal that I need to take it seriously. And it's a signal that I should think about my response, my reaction to it, that I should come at it with more generosity. And that just because it's awkward doesn't mean we aren't going to have it or have this conversation. We have to have the conversation, but somehow naming that it's awkward opens up the door to have it.
Right. And giving them that safe space to, obviously having those small chunks of conversations throughout makes them feel that it's okay to voice an opinion or ask questions, because so many people are just like, I'll just listen to what you say, walk away, and then you'll talk to your friends like, oh my God, like I want to be able to talk to you about it, so nice. Now tell us, active listening, it's often overlooked. So how can people improve their listening skills to build stronger relationships?
Yeah. There are so many things that have been written and said about active listening. And we talked already about the different levels of listening and trying to really listen with your gut.
Mm.
I think it's a muscle that you exercise, this ability for active listening. And so bringing an intention to exercise that muscle is important. So heading into a conversation and telling yourself, I'm going to try to listen at that level 3, where I pick up on not just the facts that are being communicated, but what is being said, the meaning of it, the nonverbals, the absences in the conversation, the real intent behind it. I'm going to listen for all those things. And it doesn't mean I want to, part of active listening then is checking for our own understanding. Because I could see the way you're responding is reading to me like anxiety, like you're really anxious about this choice. And I might say, Patricia, I feel like there's a lot of anxiety in this moment, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think? And you might say, oh, totally not anxiety. I'm just so excited. It might be coming across. And so we have to keep checking for understanding. There's a process called looping. It was originally developed in negotiation. So political parties negotiating with each other, national interests, or unions or hostage negotiators. And then it began to be used in marriage counseling and divorce counseling. And then now we use it in just daily conversation in any time or conflict situations in particular. And it's called looping. And it just goes like this. After you have shared something that's important, I summarize it and try to call out the key points. And then I say, did I get that right? All it is, did I get that right? Summarize it and say, did I get that right? And then you get to say, pretty close, but I think what's really important for me in this is, and then you reiterate some piece of it that was essential to you. And then I have to summarize again and say, did I get that right? And then you say yes, or you correct me, whatever it is. And we patiently work through it like this. And imagine what that does, especially in any situation where tensions are high. It says this person was not just listening to me to counteract my arguments and to like reload with their own point of view. They were listening to understand. And I am understood. It doesn't mean we agree, but I am understood. That is so essential. And that right there is what active listening is. Listening to someone else to really understand, not agree, but understand.
I've noticed that some people are really good at that. I mean, I definitely am a work in progress, but I do see some people really, really good at that, where you have a conversation and you can tell that they're hearing me, but they're also seeing my body language, what I'm doing, and maybe biting my nail, whatever the case is, so it definitely is a good skill to have. And it does make people feel like nothing's lost in translation at that point, because maybe I'm saying that and now you're telling me if you actually understood what it is I said. Again, not that you agree with me, but at least I know that you heard everything I had to say and take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now tell us, what advice do you give to individuals feeling stuck in their careers or struggling with their workplace dynamics?
When we are feeling stuck, what do we do? That's such it's such a relatable question, right? We have all at some point in our lives had that feeling of just being stuck. And there's a lot of different things that you have to decide what's right for you. But I love there's one single question I use with a lot of my clients, my leadership coaching clients, executive clients. And it's a very flexible question. I adapt it to meet the context of the situation, but it goes something like this. Okay, Patricia, imagine it's 10 years from now and you feel fulfilled. You feel energized, you feel engaged, you feel happy, you feel challenged in the best of ways. You feel like you're growing, or you are able to give in the way that you want to give. If that were true 10 years from now, tell me about the future. Tell me about it in present tense language. I just want to hear the story of the future. And I let them start talking. And then, usually people, when you ask a big question like that, their instinct is to respond with 2.5 sentences of content. And then we start realizing I've been talking for a while and I'm getting pretty far out there. Maybe I'm getting passionate about it, or maybe I said something I wasn't really sure about, but it felt right coming out of my mouth. And then they shut down. they sort of like, okay, 2.5 sentences, because we're used to back and forth and dialogue. But when someone's really stuck, they need the privilege of being listened to get unstuck. And so then I have to prompt them along. Oh, that's fascinating. Tell me what it would mean for what would day to day look like, or how would you be measuring your success in that? Or would it mean for like the tasks you have now versus the tasks you would do in that ideal environment? Or what training is required to manage a future that looks like that? And we start to have this conversation that keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding like a piece of origami that's just, there's a fold there and a new layer and a new layer, and it unfolds into something bigger. And often that single question can take us 20 or 30 minutes to unpack. Mm-hmm. And then I follow up by asking, okay, so if that's a future that you really want, that you think would be great, what does it look like to start to go after that? What are the 3 things you should be doing this month, this year, to put in place that future? And often that helps unstick people's thinking about their careers. And the final piece of it is conversations like that are blue sky. They're fabulous. They aren't always constrained by the realities of, yes, but I have to have health insurance for me and my 3 kids. There's just some practicalities. And so we have to weave those practicalities back in. So it's much like we said earlier, it's not a one-time conversation. You have this conversation and then you give yourself some assignments. So I'm going to go do an informational meeting with somebody who has a job that I think I might like, or I'm going to go read a book about this, or start following this blogger who's an expert in product management, which is a field I might want to lean into. You give yourself assignments and then you come back and have the conversation again. What do I imagine for the future? So you don't try to answer it in one day. Mm-hmm. You chunk it out, and you keep revising your answer until you get to something that feels like an actionable step forward.
But that's all great advice, because one, it kind of gets you to dissect it internally a little bit to say, okay, now that I'm talking about it, how do I really feel about it? Because you could realize that after I'm having this conversation, I'm like, I wasn't as passionate about it as I thought.
I know.
Or getting the assignments that maybe now I'm researching a little more and realize it's a lot of time dedication. I don't know if I can spare that. I've got the 3 kids, whatever the case may be. So it's a good way to get them to, I guess, say it on their own without actually saying it, learning about it to see, was that really what you want to do? And if you are so passionate, what can we do to make it happen?
Yeah.
Now tell us, as a former Forbes.com contributor and author of Better Than Fine on Substack, how do you use writing to expand your impact on communication and leadership?
Anyone who is a fan of the practice of writing knows that it is a way of thinking. It isn't a way of, I've thought and now I put it on paper. It is the thinking itself. And so often when I'm writing for my newsletter, I'll put a headline on my blank sheet of paper. I'll start working towards that headline, and I get 500 words in and realize, oh, it's actually a different question I'm answering. It's actually a different conclusion I'm drawing. And I have to go back and revise the headline, because it took my writing as thinking to get to a place of crystallizing what I believe, what I have learned. It's also writing is thinking, and it's also self-reflection, which I guess is another form of thinking as well, of who was I in that moment? Did it serve me? Did it not serve me? What could I have done? What would I do in the future that might serve me better? And so it's a fabulous way to get those ideas to take shape and crystallize, to go from being nebulous, gaseous forces in your head, to something solid that is actionable and transferable to the future. So for me, that is so much a part of the connection. And as someone who writes professionally, it also is an act of service to the world, because I have a unique position of each week sitting inside maybe 6 to 12 different companies for an hour here, an hour there, meeting with 20 or so different leaders every week. I have a ability because of that then to sort of see what's happening in the world, and to have a pulse on, it doesn't matter the size of the company. Everybody's asking this question, or seems like so many people are feeling this way. And then I have the privilege of being able to say, so what helps us in those moments? And that's it's a gift, or it's a gift to me. I mean, to be able to feel like I can serve in some small way through that.
That's great, because you could pretty much be the self-help person just on a bigger scale, because like you say, you're getting this from so many different people. So you see that this is a question that others probably have. And it's funny with writing, because I'm not much of a speaker, which despite what some people say, she never shuts up, but I don't talk like feelings or anything like that. But I put my heart and soul in everything that I write. And people always say, if I write something, it's almost like I'm talking to them, but that's how I just get everything out. For whatever it's worth. Some people would like or hate whatever I write, but I'm like, I just got all my emotions into whatever it is I wrote. That's like my flip side. You're not going to hear it from my mouth, but you'll read about it.
It's a great way of processing your emotions. You're absolutely right. And sometimes you don't even realize what you've been carrying until you hit that moment of self-reflection in your writing.
Yeah. Now, what's next for you? Are there any upcoming projects, books, or initiatives you're particularly excited to share?
Yeah. You mentioned at the start that I have a free Substack newsletter called Better Than Fine. That's such a weird title. So let me address that title. In general, we probably ask the question, how are you, 2 or 3 dozen times a day? And we traditionally get the same 3 answers. Good, okay, fine. Maybe somebody's really bold and they go for busy. It's so predictable. It's so scripted. And so the newsletter is designed to help us break those scripts and have really great dialogue, to end boring conversation and have rich conversation with the people that matter most to us. So we strengthen relationships and we have more meaningful and productive work. And it's a free newsletter, comes out every Thursday morning to help you be a leader, better leader, partner, and parent. So would love to have your folks come join me over there. Because I'm very curious about this intersection between leadership and communication and life. And we spend so much of our day in communication. I mean, I don't know how many text messages you've received while you were in this recording, but I'm guessing it's not 0. It's certainly not 0 for me. How many emails are sitting in your inbox unanswered? We both, I assume you're working from home. I'm working from home. There's people walking around upstairs that are probably waiting until I hang up to talk. We're all day communicating, but in that busyness, we so often fail to connect. And so I want to help people find ways to, in the time that they have real connection.
Nice. And how can people get a hold of you or learn more about you and your service and all that good stuff?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Amber Anderson Johnson, and on Substack at Amber A. Johnson, or Better Than Fine is the name of the newsletter. My website's amberajohnson.com. So come say hi and tell me what you're thinking, what questions you have around leadership, and maybe I'll write an article about it.
Oh, very nice. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Amber Johnson. So thanks for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.